Hello, everyone. Welcome to Grid Live Wrap Up. Joe Samaniego here, along with Ben Schneider, Kobe Lambert from the Podium Finish, and Adam Lemeries. A big hello to our Patreon subscribers, calling the show Mark and Robin for keeping us on the air throughout the entire season. You too can invest in the Grid Network by going to the Patreon link or buy me a coffee to do a one-time contribution to ensure we pay the bills and stay on the air. Now, before we get into the motorsports action, we do want to provide an update on Josef Newgarden. Josef Newgarden fell outside his motor coach after talking to IndyCar medical staff, making an additional visit. He was cleared after the initial medical evaluation from his crash during Sunday's IndyCar race at Iowa Speedway. When he fell, he did suffer an abrasion on the back of his head and went to be evaluated by medical staff in the Infield Medical Center. He was flown out to Des Moines for further evaluation to bypass the traffic following the post-race concert taking place at Iowa Speedway. Newgarden, from all reports, is alert and talking. We'll be reporting on this and additional updates on Twitter as well as on the air if we receive any additional word. And of course, definitely we encourage everyone to be sure to share their comments in the chat room as well with questions we have, especially since we're covering IndyCar, Formula One, and of course, NASCAR Cup Series. Kobe, what a race we saw to start off the morning over at France Paul Ricard circuit.
Yeah, and the French Grand Prix was another dominant performance by Red Bull driver Max Verstappen, but only after Ferrari's Charles Leclerc crashed out while leading. He went wide, lost the rear end, and spun into the wall. The other Ferrari driver, Carlos Sainz, was up to third place in the closing stages, but a 5-second pit stop penalty and a late pit stop dropped him down the running order. Carlos voices displeasure at the team for the lack of awareness and just overall been on a poor strategy, and Ferrari is definitely not executing well. We've known that all season, and it's a problem that's plagued them in the past and continues to be a major issue. And with Charles Leclerc out and Sainz having issues, is Charles Leclerc and Ferrari in trouble, especially with the run that Red Bull and Max Verstappen are on right now?
Kobe, Ferrari have been in trouble since 2008. This is nothing new, and everybody knows it. Every single weekend, we're on here on the wrap-up show. We lead off with Formula One, talk about the race that happened that morning, and we're always talking about how Ferrari, whether it's driver error, mechanical trouble, an engine issue, their strategists who are now notorious and continue to be notorious for messing things up. I still have no idea what they were thinking calling Carlos Sainz in right as he was in the middle of a battle there. And, I guess they thought maybe they could serve the 5-second penalty and get him out of the way. Or get that out of the way for him, but they shouldn't have even had the 5-second penalty to begin with. It's just absolutely ridiculous. And obviously, my heart goes out to Charles Leclerc for the incident that he had. But that's something that has been plaguing Ferrari for years now. You can think of how many times Sebastian Vettel spun around driving one of those red cars, and it's just so unfortunate. I feel for all the fans in Italy and all around the world. And day in the life, you're absolutely right. It would have been a podium probably for Sainz as well, because I think he probably would have gapped Perez and Russell and gotten to the point where that 5 seconds wouldn't have mattered. So they threw the podium away. Obviously, Leclerc threw his own race away, and I think Ferrari are absolutely in a heap of trouble at this point. There's Leclerc is 63 points behind Verstappen now, which is essentially 2.5 races. So if Red Bull have those unreliability issues come back, and Verstappen loses a couple of races there, I guess you could maybe say Leclerc would be right back in it, assuming he capitalizes and goes out and wins, which is no guarantee in Formula One. Maybe he could be back in the championship fight, but it's starting to look like Red Bull could pull away and make this a non-competitive final few rounds of the Formula One season. And the Constructors is even worse off for them right now. They're 82 back of Red Bull. And if you look at the standings actually on the driver's side, George Russell is only 1 point back of Carlos Sainz for P4. And you think of all the struggles Mercedes have had by their standards this season as well. I know they're closing the gap a little bit, but it's just been an absolute disaster for Ferrari, especially these last few weeks. And it's unfortunate that these things continue to happen as they've happened pretty much every year in one way or another since 2008.
Ferrari better be thankful that F1 has a summer break after Hungary, because if I'm Ferrari, what I would do is I would have a team meeting, and it would go something like this. Guys, we're, especially Charles Leclerc, he is, like you mentioned, man, 63 points behind Max Verstappen. he can be caught, but the way Red Bull and Max Verstappen have been going, I don't see it happening. If I'm Ferrari, I would have a team meeting and I would say, look, guys, we've had so many mistakes this year that have cost us wins, points, and podiums. We need to fix this somehow, some way, because the way it looks right now, Red Bull and Max Verstappen are going to run away with the Constructors' Championship and Drivers' Championship. They need to have a team meeting and discuss the first half of the season and get their mind focused after Hungary for the second half of the season. Otherwise, Red Bull is just going to run away and hide.
Yeah, we have a comment in the chat room from a day in the life, I believe, saying that Ferrari is not in the position to win, and Mercedes will overtake Ferrari. Of course, they will if Ferrari, keeps beating themselves and making all these mistakes. And Adam, I'm not sure if a team meeting is going to do Ferrari any good. I mean, it'll be great for them to have those several weeks off to try to reset and try to get back in the mindset. But at this point, they're going to need Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz having flawless weekends, and in the case of Leclerc, probably going to need Max Verstappen and Red Bull to have some bad luck if they realistically want to try to get back into this championship hunt, because Verstappen is starting to set sail, and we very well might have this Formula One championship wrapped up before we get to the season finale in Abu Dhabi. But it's still pretty early, and it very well could change around again. So definitely don't want to crown Max Verstappen yet as a two-time FIA Formula One world champion. And then the life says that Ferrari needs to have a strategy meeting. And like I was saying to Adam the day in the life, I'm not really sure what good that would do, because Ferrari's had issues with strategy for many, many, many years. It's been said since 2008. So if they haven't gotten it done by now, what makes you think they're going to be able to improve on that in the future? And speaking of Ferrari drivers, Carlos Sainz, he got the fastest lap, so that's something. And unfortunately, winning driver of the day doesn't give you any bonus points either. Double podium finish for Mercedes, first time this year, and George Russell's third place battle with Sergio Perez was very entertaining. He took advantage of Perez when the virtual safety car ended. Red Bull has a big advantage over Ferrari and the constructors, has been mentioned, and Ferrari is closing in, and Mercedes is closing in on Ferrari, and it's a 63-point advantage with Verstappen over Leclerc. Joe, is Mercedes in a prime spot for next race weekend in Hungary?
I say yes, they're in a prime spot to get potentially double podiums or even a win. This is Hungary. Qualifying is going to be very important. Mercedes are looking much better already, and one of the big things, if they got a starting position up towards the front, Lewis Hamilton could easily, I think, hold out the competition and get a podium finish or a win. The big thing for Ferrari, if you're going to try to get points at Hungary, you got to be flawless. Qualifying, we know they're good at that. It's really hard to pass in Hungary. We've seen so many first-time winners: Fernando Alonso, Jenson Button, last year, Esteban Ocon. We know this track could present a lot of challenges when it comes to overtaking. Sometimes you don't need to have the fastest car. All you got to be is up front. And as we've been talking about, have a good strategy to stay out front, because without the strategy to stay out front, you're going to fall behind. That's what Ferrari has been demonstrating lately.
Yeah, for sure. And a little bit behind, Alpine outscored McLaren when Fernando Alonso, Lando Norris, Esteban Ocon, and Daniel Ricciardo finished 6th through 9th. So Alpine is now in sole possession of 4th place after entering tied with McLaren. Ricciardo had a bit better performance and scored points, but Alpine had one leg up on them. Ben, does this add more speculation on that second McLaren seat, especially if Alpine pulls away from McLaren in the constructors?
Well, before I answer the question, I understand we have a couple of comments coming in through the chat room here from Michael Tiller. I'm crying for Leclerc. It feels like he's getting the Vettel treatment. Well, I think Vettel got the Alonso treatment, and Alonso got the Massa treatment, and you can go back until you get to Schumacher on that one. It's, like we said, it's just been a problem with Ferrari for years. He also says it's nice to see Lewis back on form, but with Max having a firm lead on the board, it's going to be hard work to see him get number 8. Yeah, I think the championship is probably out of reach for Lewis at this point this season. Even his own teammate George Russell is still ahead of him. So I do think Mercedes will get a win at some point later this season. Lewis will at least keep that streak alive. I think if they can do that, that will be a success for them, especially after the way the season started. And again, it's important to keep perspective because there are 7 teams, as I've said on this show before, 7 teams in Formula One would love to have the car in the pace that Mercedes have right now. It's just by their standards, the 8-time defending Constructors champions, it's been an unfortunate down season by their standards, but still a solid season when you look across the board. Talking about Alpine and McLaren here, obviously the battle for 4th has been something that, except when Ferrari, ironically enough, kind of laid an egg in 2020, being called the best of the rest. And I think what Kevin Magnussen once called Formula 1.5, if you will, the big 3 have always seemed to have a little bit of an advantage over the rest of the field. So that 4th place is very lucrative and valuable in the constructor standings. And I think, it's unfortunate to say, I know Ricciardo got a win last year at Monza, and McLaren had that epic 1-2 finish with Lando Norris. Lando Norris probably should have won in Russia as well. But I think McLaren really need to take a look at that 2nd seat. I know Daniel Ricciardo says his future is set. They say that they're, set through 2023 and they're going to honor that contract. But I just don't know, especially if they lose 4th in the constructors to Alpine or to, whoever it is. You look at all the talent that McLaren seem to be harvesting right now. Obviously, Palou is a major question mark. We don't know the status of his contract situation with Ganassi to the fullest extent. But you've got Pato O'Ward there as well, who we'll talk about a little bit later on in the show. And, all sorts of talent at McLaren that would be happy to take that 2nd seat. Even Colton Herta tested for them. And the reports of that test went very, very well. Obviously, the super license might be a little bit of an issue, and I'm sure we'll talk with Josh about that on the Encore show tomorrow as well. I see Michael continuing in the chat there. Yes, it's been quite a chain reaction for Ferrari the last several years. But, in terms of McLaren, I think you really have to take a look at that 2nd seat. It's unfortunate. I think it would be a shame if Formula One lost Daniel Ricciardo, but I think at this point in his career, he might be better suited. He might get more of his energy and positive vibes back if he went to go somewhere else and be a little bit more successful there, because the grind of Formula One is very, very tough. And it seems like, despite his upbeat character and perspective on things and everything, you can't imagine Daniel Ricciardo's having too much fun right now.
Yeah, it certainly doesn't feel like Ricciardo is having too much fun right now in Formula One and in McLaren. I mean, he did win the Italian Grand Prix at Monza, and that's about the only highlight he's really had at McLaren, and that was a really good day for him. But besides that, it's really been a major struggle for him and a lot of Formula One drivers who left the sport and went over to another discipline of racing. A lot of them rediscovered their love for racing. Look at all of the fun Roman Grosjean is having in Indycar right now. I have a feeling if Daniel Ricciardo tried a different discipline of racing, like if Ricciardo wanted to go to IndyCar, Formula E, switch to endurance racing, or maybe try his hand at NASCAR, I think you see a larger grin on Daniel Ricciardo's face. I know he likes to smile all the time, even in the toughest circumstances, but he might have a lot more fun elsewhere. And see Dan the lights there in the chat room. You say IndyCar for Daniel Ricciardo, yes. Formula E, no. And Ben was talking about honoring the contract. Maybe they will honor the contract, but it won't be in Formula One. Maybe they'll offer him an IndyCar seat, depending on what happens with Palou or Formula E. And also, as Josh has said on our past shows, McLaren is deciding whether or not to run a hypercar program, and maybe that could be an option. So a lot of possibilities out there. Michael Tiller says you want to see the smiling assassin, the honey badger, do well, and he's been open-minded quite a bit. As you see, Ricciardo has been super open-minded and getting back to the race itself. Overall, decent race today in France at Paul Ricard and Le Castellet, but it could have been different if Leclerc didn't bring out the safety car before his crash. The field was really spreading out, and this circuit has produced some not so memorable races, and many think last year's running of the French Grand Prix was the best one overall. And there are some doubts this weekend about the future of Formula One racing in France, and with all of the rumors, should Formula One continue a yearly stop in France, considering they have 2 French drivers, Pierre Gasly, Esteban Ocon, and the French team, Alpine?
Yes, Kobe. And why? I'll tell you, because there have been so many great F1 drivers who have come from France. Give you an example. Alain Prost, who is from France. He won 3 F1 World Championships, and his rival was late great Ericsson Senna. You have John Lacey, who who has been successful with Ferrari in the past. And last, but definitely not least, Olivier Panis, who is also from France, won his only F1 race in the Grand Prix of Monaco. And plus, if F1 decides they don't want to run a circuit power car anymore, there's 2 other tracks that they could go to, and one of them has actually hosted F1 races, and that's the Magny-Cours circuit. And also there is the Dijon track as well, and the Dijon track has hosted many sports car races in the past. So I think F1 should stay in France because, and pardon me, I will say that Alain Prost is a 4-time F1 world champion and not a 3-time F1 world champion. So I think F1 should stay in France to have a race there. We saw a lot of fans there today, so I think F1 should have a race in France, in the future.
Well, you're right. Adam Prost is a legend, and obviously 4 championships, 51 wins. There's a lot of history when it comes to Formula One in France, but this particular track, since it was brought back in 2018, I think last year, obviously, we got a very memorable race, but last year we were spoiled. We got plenty of memorable races and a very memorable championship battle. I think that certainly helped matters at a lot of tracks. I just don't know that Paul Ricard is the track that Formula One should be at. We talk about all the time, them wanting to expand the calendar, and you hear rumors of 25 to 30 races, which I think is absolutely crazy, and is way beyond where the cap should be. I think in a perfect world, yes, France would have at least 1 race on the calendar, and now that I think about it, probably just 1 race. I don't know that France is a country that could probably get away with hosting 2 races and taking up a full 10% of the schedule. But it's unfortunate. I think Germany should be on the calendar as well. A lot of these European countries that have a lot of history and a lot of great drivers and teams that have come from those countries, ideally they should be on the calendar. But you also have to look at the races and the show and the product that those tracks have put on over the last few years. And I've got to tell you, if Belgium and Spa is not safe, as we're hearing rumors that track may be up in the air at this point, then I think no track is safe, maybe not even Monaco. So I think when you look at the race today, was it better than what we saw in 18 and 19? I think so. I remember there was an op-ed that came out from somebody at ESPN, I think, after either the first or the second race there. They said it was the worst race since the 2005 United States Grand Prix. Probably a little bit of a stretch, but if that is the vibe that you're getting, that somebody's writing for a respected outlet like that and being serious about that opinion and talking about questions as to whether or not the sport needs to change going forward, that's something that seriously needs to be considered. So I think obviously Ferrari being Ferrari certainly helps the entertainment factor today and bunch the field back up again, obviously with the safety car. But, I think when you look at the history of France, it should be on the calendar in a perfect world. I don't know that Paul Ricard is that circuit and can be that circuit going forward. I understand we have some comments in the chat room again. Thank you, Michael. Yes, Germany should return. I think they left the Hockenheim ring over high prices, if I recall correctly. I believe something like that. There's questions as to whether or not people want to pay for them, and obviously money is what makes the world go round. And it's not any. That's certainly true in Formula One, more so than even other sports around the world. Watching that incident, however, it looks like Charles took the corner too hard, which could explain. Yeah, I would concur there. I think it was just a matter of driver error, and it's unfortunate. But that, again, it's what we come to expect from Ferrari these days: just driver error, mechanical errors, strategy errors, all sorts of errors.
Yeah, a whole bunch of errors with Ferrari. And getting back to the question, I agree with all of you that Formula One should continue racing in France. I believe it was Esteban Ocon earlier during the week said, if we can't come back to Paul Ricard, I want Formula One to go race at Le Mans. I guess he's referring to the Bugatti circuit there, although it would be really cool to see Formula One cars flying down the Mulsanne straight. Unfortunately, we know that certainly wouldn't happen at all. And I guess the other option to keep Formula One in France would be a street race in Paris. I know that's been teased a little bit, but I have a feeling that a lot of people are getting burned out with all of the street races. And Max Verstappen made comment earlier in the week, when I'm in Formula One 2028, like almost all of the races we're going to be running going to be street race. And I have a feeling when you have too much of something like that, it can become oversaturated and really burn people out. So hopefully Formula One can find the right balance with street races and your natural purpose road courses. And have more comments in the chat room. Michael Tiller saying, Ben, you agree that Monaco is hard, but like you said to Joshua Birch a few weeks ago, these new cars certainly make the tracks more challenging. And thank you for sharing that comment, Michael. And now we'll switch gears over to IndyCar, a special doubleheader weekend with Hy-Vee really doing an excellent job with their marketing.
Yeah, we'll have a similar debate a little bit later on here in this segment regarding diversity and the types of tracks we see on the IndyCar schedule as well. But it's a successful doubleheader this weekend at Iowa Speedway. And Kobe, like you mentioned, Hy-Vee really going all in on sponsoring both events and activating their sponsorship in this sport. It's great to see. Packed grandstands, great super speedway racing. Pato Award took the win today. Yesterday's winner was Josef Newgarden, both in Chevrolets. The competition was fierce all around, and everybody is talking about how the points shook up. Marcus Ericsson still leads, but the gap has come down a little bit with 5 races remaining, and Gateway the only oval left this season. Adam, we'll start with you. Can Marcus Ericsson leave this weekend satisfied that he leaves the short oval with the points lead?
Yes. He gained a lot of experience this weekend running at Iowa Speedway, and he logged a lot of laps. So better be thankful that he left this weekend satisfied, because the rest of the IndyCar drivers have run here in the past, so they knew what to expect. So Marcus Ericsson, he has to be satisfied leaving the short oval in Iowa with the points lead.
For me, I think yes and no. Yes, because he's obviously still the points leader going to the IMS road course next Sunday, which is a track he's certainly been strong at. But at the same time, I'm sure Marcus wish he could have had a stronger run and had some of his rivals up there experience more bad luck, because his points lead is going to be super slim. And just one bad race next week in the IMS road course, and he could find himself behind, and we could have a new points leader. So I think if you're Marcus Ericsson, yes, you have to be happy that you're able to keep the points lead, and you have to be a little bit disappointed, because as a race car driver, you always want to get more.
Well, I got to say, I think Marcus's post-race interview was very telling. I think he kind of went into this weekend expecting that he might not have the points lead by the end of it. He probably wouldn't have the points lead if Newgarden hadn't had that mechanical issue that took him out and kept him from sweeping the weekend. But, I think if Marcus is satisfied, who are we to question him? I think, the fact that he still has a points lead is a win. And obviously, Kobe, like you mentioned, it's by no means safe. He's going to have to continue firing on all cylinders if he wants to go on and win this championship. But I do think he's in a good position and can come away from this weekend satisfied. You always want more as a racing driver if you get anything but the win. But I think for Marcus, we can chalk it up to a successful weekend, that's for sure. Now, in the first race, like I mentioned, we saw Josef Newgarden in absolute total control from his teammate Will Power, really eating into Ericsson's lead in the points there. It looked like today he was going to cut in even more and maybe even take the points lead for himself, but a mechanical issue sent him into the wall while he was leading the race. Newgarden is now 34 points back and tied for third with Scott Dixon, who's looking for his 7th championship to tie AJ Foyt for the most all-time, and he is now well in the title picture himself as well. Kobe, we'll go to you first on this one. Which drivers in the championship hunt do you think will be the biggest challenge for Ericsson as the season wraps up?
Well, I think if we can have a healthy Josef Newgarden, and still really early about his medical condition that happened at the end of the race, so we don't know for sure if he's going to be cleared to race. And Newgarden is expected to see the doctor later this week for them to medically clear him to compete at the IMS road course on Saturday afternoon. So if Newgarden is fine, I could see him potentially being one of the biggest challengers to Marcus Ericsson. As Joseph already said, they've been strong, but still some inconsistency with the number 2 team, because some weekends, when they're completely on it, they dominate, and when they're not dominating, they completely fall off a cliff and have something wrong. So Newgarden is certainly going to have to improve his consistency and keep an eye on that number 9, Scott Dixon. He's just lurking and just basically doing Scott Dixon things. He's been extremely consistent, doing a lot of smart points racing, and if, before you know it, Scott Dixon might very well be in the hunt for this as well. And you also can't count out Will Power, who's been extremely consistent this year as well. And Michael Tiller says that you definitely say Josef Newgarden. I think this IndyCar championship is still very much wide open.
Very much wide open. I'm looking at Will Power, the consistency he's had all season long. This weekend, he could have easily won this race today. Well, Pato Ward got the win, and Award looks like in the ovals they're really strong. Needs some improvement for that consistency. There's just some weekends, like at Mid Ohio, he's just not there. Scott Dixon, boy, championship is coming down to the wire, and there he is. It seemed like at the beginning part of the season, we were all wondering, where's Scott Dixon? Where is he? Well, now he's starting to creep up closer and closer to the point championship. And Alex Palou, still within striking distance, within one race, done a massively great job considering all the distractions. If he could keep that up, he could be up there as well. Everyone else I know that are still in the top 10 has a mathematical shot at the champion, but I just feel like they lack the consistency, like Colton Herta, Rossi, Rosenquist. We saw him crash in that first race. And then McLaughlin just seems he has some races, he has bad breaks. So really, I'm looking at the top 5. If Ericsson could hold them all off, well deserves championship, but we still got 5 races to go.
You can only imagine where Scott Dixon would be right now if he had gone on to win the Indianapolis 500 that he was running so well in before falling back with the pit road speeding penalty. Imagine where he'd be. Obviously, nobody's thinking about points at the 500, but in hindsight, it could be looking like a 7th championship for Scott Dixon right now rather than a 1st championship for his teammate Marcus Ericsson, but there's still plenty of time. We'll have to see how that all plays out. Now, speaking of Chip Ganassi racing, I want to highlight Jimmie Johnson, a fantastic run for him today. His best career IndyCar finish with a 5th place run. He also had a strong run in yesterday's race, finishing 11th, though that doesn't really tell the whole story. He ran much higher than that at times throughout. So, Kobe, what do you make of Johnson's performance this weekend at Iowa, and are you surprised that he's adapted this well to the ovals this quickly?
Well, based on what we saw earlier this season at Texas Motor Speedway, I can't say that I was surprised at all. I was actually more surprised that he struggled during the Indianapolis 500 after that great run at Texas. I thought, and the Speedy Show throughout the month of May, I really thought Jimmy would potentially be an outside contender for the Indianapolis 500, but he never really showed that same speed in the race. It fell back, had some struggles, and ended up crashing out of this year's Indy 500. And then coming to Iowa, starting with race 1 yesterday, I thought he had a really decent race, especially, after spinning out. Some people thought he might be able to spin and win based on how fast he was going. And Jimmy talked about using his experience from his time in the NASCAR Cup Series, and that spin happened because he put the left side tires on the paint, and he mentioned in the NASCAR Cup car that gives you more grip. So he tried that in the IndyCar, and he found out in the IndyCar you can't actually do that. So that was a lesson learned that he put in his mind for today. And you're right, Ben, it didn't tell the full story from yesterday, because Jimmy was racing for a spot in the top 5 at the end, but unfortunately, his tires just wore off and lost a lot of grip and slid all the way back outside the top 10. But today, a really strong race by Johnson. Thought he had a really successful weekend at Iowa, and based on all his years in NASCAR, those 7 championships, what we've seen at Texas Motor Speedway, I can't say that I'm truly surprised to see how well he's adapting to oval racing in IndyCar. And Dana Life says that Jimmie Johnson will win at Gateway. Well, based on how he run at Iowa, that very well might be a possibility, because Jimmy looks super comfortable out there on the ovals. He looked more comfortable than these drivers who have been in open wheel racing their entire career. And even Marcus Ericsson noted in his post-race interview that he's still learning on the oval, and he said he could tell how Jimmie Johnson's his comfort level's been on those type of tracks. And Breezy B says what Jimmy finished today, Jimmie Johnson finished 5th, which is his best finish so far in his IndyCar Series career, topping that 6th place finish at Texas Motor Speedway. So Jimmy's really had a wonderful weekend in Iowa, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to be watching to see if he can repeat the same performance at Gateway.
Kobe, you mentioned Jimmie Johnson's success in NASCAR, and I think that has a lot to do with his success in IndyCar because NASCAR, they run a lot of ovals. So I was really impressed with Jimmy Johnson all weekend at Iowa, especially he had his best career IndyCar finish today of 5th place. And you mentioned the next oval race is a Gateway. I didn't like just said Jimmy Johnson is going to win a Gateway. You know, Jimmy Johnson was my pick to win today, Iowa. So I wouldn't be surprised if Jimmy Johnson does end up winning a Gateway. All these IndyCar drivers better watch out because this former 7-time NASCAR Cup champion is really good on ovals. Gateway could see Jimmy win his first career IndyCar win.
That would be quite something, and I think it's worth reminding everybody that when you look at Jimmy Johnson's 83 NASCAR Cup wins, 82 of them were on ovals. His lone road course win was Sonoma in 2010. So even when he was in NASCAR, he was no slouch on the road courses, and he very nearly won the inaugural Charlotte Roval race as well, which ultimately probably would have been his final career victory since he came after his what was his final career win in 2017. But when it comes to Jimmy, he's always kind of been an oval track driver, and I don't think it's any surprise that he's been able to pick those up a little bit quicker in IndyCar as well. Now, speaking of the ovals, I'm sure Jimmy would love a more diversified schedule when it comes to the types of tracks IndyCar is racing at, with more ovals on the schedule as well. We saw a great crowd this weekend at Iowa, great on-track product. Both the Iowa races and the upcoming race at Gateway seem to be very well promoted. So, Joe, I'll go to you on this one. Do you think IndyCar needs more ovals like a Richmond, or like maybe even bringing a track like Michigan back to diversify the schedule a little bit?
Yes, I would be very happy to see Michigan back on track. The Michigan 500, that was one of the big races everyone looked to year after year. I think with the safety improvement, it was fun seeing those cars, especially in the kart era, 230 plus miles per hour. But with the safety improvement there, I feel a lot more better seeing IndyCar there. Richmond, I see that as a potentially a great show as well. Under the lights, if they could do a Saturday night, I think that will draw a lot of fans. But the big thing, the marketing, the sponsorship, what Hy-Vee did this weekend, phenomenal job. Sold out crowd, huge crowds for the concerts. They had food trucks there. It felt like a festival event. That's what the fans want to see along with the race. This is just something where I think what we saw Bomarito do over at Gateway year after year, getting fans there, that's another win. Getting sponsors that really want to put up a lot of effort and attention to the race, get the fans to the track, that's going to be what makes oval racing successful. And I know I even didn't mention about Milwaukee Mile, another historic track.
Joe, and you mentioned the Milwaukee Mile, and for you viewers that may not be aware of, that was the race that came the week after the Indy 500, and we saw a lot of success on the Milwaukee Mile in West Allis, Wisconsin. A lot of drivers loved racing there. IndyCar needs more ovals like Richmond, like Milwaukee, like Michigan. I'll even throw in the Magic Mile at Loudon, New Hampshire. IndyCar has raced there in the past too, so I'd like to see some more oval tracks in the schedule. It would be a lot of diversity. Give some of these, especially European racers who don't have a lot of oval experience, it would give them experience competing on an oval. So yeah, I'd like to see more ovals on the IndyCar schedule. And what Hy-Vee did this weekend, a 10 out of 10. That's the way an IndyCar race should be promoted.
Well, that's what it takes. It takes great promotion. And I know Michael Andretti's trying to get this Andretti Global effort off the ground, but he played a massive role in bringing IndyCar back to the Milwaukee Mile, going back almost a decade now. But I would love to see that track back and some other tracks as well. Michael Tiller says, I remember Ericsson at Nashville not long ago, though. That got me interested in other genres of racing. I guess you're referring to the street race there in Nashville, and of course, IndyCar's raced at the Nashville Super Speedway in the past as well. That maybe could be another one we're seeing racing Nashville Super Speedway again with NASCAR being back there. That might be another option to bring IndyCar back there as well. So I think there's certainly a lot of ovals. They were supposed to go back to Richmond, and then the pandemic messed up those plans. But I don't know if there's still people that want to get that effort off the ground. It would be probably the closest IndyCar race to where I'm at now that they're not going to Pocono anymore. I don't know that they're ready to go back to Pocono following the Wickens crash and obviously Justin Wilson's death there. I think there's still some safety improvements that could be made to the track. I think it's suitable for IndyCar racing if IndyCar does it right there, but I don't know that we're far enough removed to the point where everybody would be comfortable going back there. But there are certainly other ovals that would be good candidates as well. I think the schedule really needs some of them on it as soon as possible.
Yes, and moving on to NASCAR now, we'd originally planned to talk about Denny Hamlin, the race winner, but we have some major breaking news to report from the track. Denny Hamlin, the first place finisher, and Kyle Busch, the second place finisher, both have been disqualified. So that means the driver who finished third, Chase Elliott, wins today at Pocono. Yes, so this is a big surprise, and we don't know the reason yet. To explain why both Hamlin and Busch were disqualified, my colleague from the podium finish, Nathan Solomon, says that NASCAR is going to be arriving in the media center shortly. So as soon as we have the official explanation from NASCAR, we'll be sure to share it to you before the end of our programs. And starting with you, Ben, and I guess we'll just go around the table here. What's your reaction to the disqualification of Denny Hamlin and Kyle Busch?
I'm shocked. I got to say, I had my script up on the other side of the screen, so I wasn't looking at our private chat. I missed, I think, Kobe, you and Joe both put that in there. Wow. I've got to, I'm not sure. Is this the first time that a Cup winner has been disqualified? I know we've seen Ross Chastain got disqualified from his win, and I think it might have happened in Xfinity as well. But we've seen Cup disqualifications before. I'm trying to think if it's happened since 2019 where the winner of the Cup race lost the win. I don't quote me on that, but I can't recall that happening before. That's huge. And that's got to be a massive momentum shift for Toyota as well, to have their 1-2 finish taken away and Gibbs. And obviously M&Ms were a title sponsor this weekend. It would have been very fitting if maybe Kyle Busch could have inherited that win, but I'm hearing he was disqualified as well. Just absolutely crazy stuff. And, Chase Elliott picking up a bit of an unexpected inherited victory as well. I feel silly saying I'm speechless having just gone on for a minute here, but that's to have both of your cars taken out like that. It's just, that's shocking. We always know that it's a possibility, and we have to keep our fingers crossed everybody passes tech. Obviously that didn't happen today.
Did it happen today? This is just something where I cannot recall a Cup Series winner being DQ'd. I believe, like you said, this might be the first, but to now have Chase Elliott go from third to first, this is really going to define everything in the playoffs. Everyone was talking about Denny Hamlin's now the second seed. Well, all those points are gone. Chase Elliott, more playoff points. That just extends his lead. One driver I could see having a good break from this, Ryan Blaney, considering he DNF, he's in a position where he definitely doesn't want to see the spread of points get more and more towards the front. But now that Denny Hamlin's, he gained more points because that's another 2 positions with Kyle Busch falling below him that he picked up despite not finishing the race. This is just going to be something else where I think Chase Elliott now, he's going to have one hand on the regular season championship. This is going to get a lot of folks talking, and definitely we're going to be having more updates throughout the day.
And now Denny Hamlin cannot say he tied Jeff Gordon for the most victories at Pocono after this disqualification. Like you said, I am speechless. I don't know what to say. I mean, stunned, shocked, speechless. I have no words. And crazy.
I hate to bring up the Mickey Elliott memes that are probably going to circulate on Twitter, but talk about backing into a win. No disrespect to Chase Elliott coming home third today. It was a great run, but certainly benefiting from whatever misfortune struck Joe Gibbs Racing here today, or wherever they went over the line. Of course, we're still waiting to hear what exactly caused the disqualifications here. But like you said, Adam, Joe, Kobe, it's just crazy, to try to react to this in real time. That's a massive blow to Joe Gibbs Racing and to Toyota as well.
Yeah, certainly a massive blow to Joe Gibbs Racing and Toyota. And on my other screen, I'm actually looking at a tweet Denny Hamlin sent out in 2019 saying, "Praying to the tech gods right now."
That's
Maybe,
right.
maybe he shouldn't have wished that because right now it didn't work out in his favor at all. And just like you guys, I'm totally speechless. And we'll have to get clarification if this is the first time we've ever seen a Cup winner get disqualified. I know in the past we had, this encumbered thing, but you were still able to keep the win. But under the new rules now, where you can get disqualified, he completely takes the win right away. And I believe this is it's certainly I can't think of a time where the driver who finished first and second both got DQ'd and the driver in third ends up winning. This is really surprising to see this develop, and massive blow to Denny Hamlin morale wise. Kyle Busch as well, who didn't seem really we didn't seem too happy on pit road after the race, but that's typical Kyle Busch when he's not winning. Yeah, so we'll continue to update this story for as long as we're on the air, and once we get that information, be sure to pass along to all of our viewers watching around the world. And next, we're going to talk about an incident that happened with 18 laps to go. It was another edition of Denny Hamlin versus Ross Chastain. Hamlin gave Chastain no space on the outside. They had small contact that put Chastain into the wall. The one spun down the track into Kevin Harvick, and then he hit the inside wall, and Ross was out of contention for the day. And many suspect this was the payback. Chastain said he had it coming and been owed that. Some feel like it's not over between the two. So here's my question for all three of you. Will Denny call it even, or does Chastain still need to watch out for the 11? And based on what happened between Chastain and Hamlin today, do you think this disqualification is, quote unquote karma for the 11?
Well, I think now it's even. I think we're all done. And we actually had a comment from someone new who came in Penguin camp, and he said, crushing for Hamlin, thought he broke Gordon's record, tied Tony Stewart, not to mention his daughter joined him in victory lane. Yeah, that's wow. That's crushing for Denny Hamlin. I think now it's even. I think there's no more retaliation between Denny Hamlin and Ross Chastain. I think the rivalry is all done, and we should move on.
I would say the rivalry would be over, but Denny Hamlin just got the win taken away. So is it really over? Because now Denny Hamlin, essentially, I moved on. I got the win. That win's gone now. He got a big. Ross Chastain finished ahead of Denny Hamlin today with that DQ. So I still think Denny Hamlin is going to race Ross Chastain very hard, no breaks. Denny Hamlin mentioned he wants the respect. Ross Chastain might give him respect room, but here's the thing, especially if we're in the playoffs, if Denny could find a way to get around Chastain for something, whether it's a win to get in or just to ruin Ross's chances of advancing, it's very possible, but I think it's still up in the air. I don't think it's just settled yet.
Well, Joe, I've got to say, I get where Kyle Petty was coming from. I thought he put it very well in the broadcast today, in terms of what was probably going through Hamlin's mind. But if the wreck wasn't intentional, I think payback was certainly on his mind at the very least. You can't tell me that Denny Hamlin's not a good enough driver to know where that line is. And I think he got as close as you can come to crossing it without actually crossing it. And I got to say, I'm not a fan, of doing something like that on the restart when the field is all bunched up. We're lucky that we only really lost Kevin Harvick in that incident as well. And I know Harvick was able to limp home after that, but that could have been a much bigger accident than it was going through on the first lap. I think, like you said, Joe, if Denny goes on to win the race today, Ross has accepted it, and he was very accepting in his interview and said, basically, look, this has been coming for me for months. There's not much more to say there. I think we should drop it. I think NBC in particular should drop it as well. There have been a couple of really awkward interviews, I've got to say, from the NBC team with Ross Chastain the last few weeks. So hopefully they can put that to bed. Although if any prior fights like this are any indication, they're still showing the Joey Logano, Matt Kenseth incident every time we go to Martinsville. So knowing the media, this probably is not going to be over in their minds just yet. But I think, it probably would have had a much better chance of dying down if Hamlin had been able to sit back and celebrate a win tonight. Obviously, that's not going to happen as well. I just did some quick research as well. Denny Hamlin was the one that lost an Xfinity victory at Darlington several years ago. That was the race that Dale Jr. did, his one race a year in 2019. Cole Custer ended up inheriting that win. So this is twice now in 2 different series that Hamlin has had a win taken away under this new rule. And it's very unfortunate for everybody at Joe Gibbs Racing, like we mentioned, still kind of in shock trying to process everything here.
Yeah, it's still a big shock trying to process this whole stunning situation. And I believe we have some comments in the chat room. For me, yeah, Alex Fleener says that it is definitely not over based off Hamlin's comments at the end of the race. Hamlin's going to wait until he can try to successfully Harvick, Chastain, in the playoffs. Well, I certainly hope that the incident between them is over, but I have a feeling, if the opportunity presents itself in the playoffs, let's say at a Martinsville or whatever, and Chastain needs to win again in Championship 4, I can see Denny Hamlin potentially roughing him up. But I think, based on the incident that happened today, you think both of them are even now. Ross got Denny got him back, and now they can, call it 50-50, and we're going to move on and focus on with the rest of our seasons. And Penguin Camp says that was too unsatisfying of a payback for this to be over. I think it would be over if he did it during the playoffs. Also, Chastain left himself open for more in his interview. We really appreciate you all for sharing your comments this evening. We still haven't heard word from NASCAR yet why they got disqualified. Still waiting for them to arrive in the media center so they can let the world know why in the world did the first and second place cars both get DQ'd. And Michael Tiller says, big question, but you're with Adam. It sounds like there was a bit of karma there, but really got to be careful because is not over. I'm sure the happiest person in Pocono right now is probably or leaving Pocono is probably Ross Chastain, because as you mentioned, Ross is going to end up finishing ahead of Denny with this disqualification and moving on in this race. Toyota still looks strong despite what happened with Hamlin and Kyle Busch. The other Joe Gibbs Racing Toyotas, Martin Truex Jr., Christopher Bell in 23-11 race, and another good finish for Bubba Wallace, and including Ty Gibbs, who made his surprise Cup Series debut after Kurt Busch wasn't medically cleared after the display of concussion-like symptoms. Ty Gibbs had a strong top 20 finish in his very first Cup event, and now we approach another road course race at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, a special doubleheader race weekend with the NTT Indycar Series. Is this a potential wildcard race to get a 15th different winner, or will we see more of the usual faces up front?
Well, first of all, I got to give a call to Ty Gibbs. His last minute, jumping in for Kurt Busch after his wreck in qualifying. Ty Gibbs had a solid day. So, but going back to the question, I think this could be a wild card race, but I think we'll see the usual suspects up there. AJ Allmendinger is a contender. Chase Elliott, Denny Hamlin. So I think all the regulars you see that do really good on road courses. I think that'll happen at the Brickyard next Sunday.
We could see a surprise. Or sorry, Joe, were you going to go in there?
Oh, I was going to say, go ahead, son.
Yeah, no worries. Adam, I'm glad you brought up Allmendinger because obviously he won on the Indy road course last year and is a threat to win on the road courses every time we go there. You could argue maybe should have won the race at Coda before Ross Chastain had something to say about that. Obviously, Allmendinger's part-time, so you might be thinking that doesn't affect the playoff standings at all. And you're right when it comes to the driver's standings. But the Owners' Championship uses the same playoff format. And I got to tell you, I'm looking for the standings right now. Obviously, they're all going to be jumbled up again with the reshuffling from the disqualifications. But Jayski has the owner's points following the previous race at New Hampshire. That Kaulig car of a 16 is in 31st, or going into the Pocono race today was 31st with 281 points, 15 back of Front Row Motorsports 38 car driven by Todd Gilliland. So should Allmendinger go out and go 2 for 2 and win at the IMS road course, that would probably launch that 16 car into the top 30 in the owner's standings, and then that shuffles up the owner's championship playoff grid a little bit more than the drivers even. So talk about getting to 16 different winners. If it's Allmendinger, it doesn't affect the drivers, but it could affect the owners, and that's something to keep an eye on as well, especially on the road courses here. Michael Tiller saying, speaking of which, I'm curious on something at the Brickyard. Do they only race on the oval? or are they still using the road circuit F1 used when they raced there? They took away the Brickyard 400 going into last season. It was very controversial, and some drivers are still wishing that NASCAR returns to the oval at some point. I'd like to see them do both. I think, if there's any track that deserves 2 dates on the calendar, make it IMS, but give 1 date to the oval and 1 date to the road course, so that you still have the crown jewel, the Brickyard 400, and can get in a road course race at a world-class circuit as well. And Elia Lagarda says there, I'm sad that Denny and Kyle failed tech. I think a lot of Toyota fans certainly probably feel the same way, not just to have the winner fail tech as well, but Kyle Busch probably not going to be too happy losing his second place finish. And Penguin Camp, yes, NASCAR is using the road course layout at IMS as well. But a lot of news all happening right away. We're doing our best here to keep up with it live on the air.
Yeah, we're doing our best to try to keep up with everything happening live here on the air. And we have an update from the track. NASCAR says Joe Erickson can obviously appeal the disqualification, and they're speaking to the media right now, telling them that the reason why Kyle Busch and Denny Hamlin's car were disqualified, it was because of a part called the front fascia. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. FASCIA, and the definition for the front bumper fascias are typically large panels that are designed to extend across the front of a vehicle, cover the shock absorbing components, improve vehicle aerodynamics, and provide an attractive appearance. And I apologize if I completely butcher that name. This is ongoing news story. I didn't have time to see the proper pronunciation, but so far, that's all NASCAR has said on this issues. Yeah, so this is certainly a hot news story that's happening live.
Hot news story. We'll be providing more updates as we're on the air and breaking them to you. As we wait for some more news, we'll get into the grid ranking, in which case the top 10 saw some changes, but not a whole lot. If you take a look at the grid rank for week 10, all 8 series in the grid ranking made it in the top 10, and the first time 6 different series in the top 6. We have 2 MotoGP riders and 2 supercar drivers. The big change, though, came in 25th, where Lewis Hamilton now got in as Carlos Sainz fell out of the grid ranking. The top 5 drivers from each individual grid rating gets in. And, of course, with this big news, Chase Elliott, he was listed as 13th. He is going to move up some because of the disqualification, earning that win. And then, of course, Kyle Busch, he's going to lose some points as well. So a lot of changes. It's not official yet with this new news coming from the NASCAR about the disqualification. And overall, a lot, especially with Ferrari, seeing the bad luck, the drop-in they're seeing from Charles Leclerc dropping down, Carlos Sainz dropping out. It has really been hit or miss for this team. And this weekend, Mercedes, they're looking better, especially now that Lewis Hamilton and George Russell are both in the grid ranking. Ben, is this an indication that Lewis Hamilton and George Russell can come out stronger in the second half of the F1 season and potentially outscore Ferrari?
Don't be shocked if Mercedes finished second in the constructors this year. And, I know that sounds crazy based on the pace that we've seen. It probably still sounds a little bit crazy based on the pace that Mercedes have. I know they closed the gap a little bit. I'm not saying I would put money on it, but when you look at the troubles that Ferrari seem to find themselves facing week in and week out, it wasn't just Leclerc losing all those points spinning out of a lead today. Obviously, Carlos Sainz had what probably would have been a podium taken away from him from their strategy. I just don't trust Ferrari to be able to bring home second in the constructors, let alone taking the fight to Red Bull for the first. It's a very uphill battle at this point for Charles Leclerc, and I think the constructors is pretty much sealed up at this point unless Red Bull's unreliability starts to come back. But I think Red Bull are going to start to pull away a little bit, and Mercedes, assuming that they continue to close the gap as well. We know Lewis Hamilton's a 7-time world champion, and George Russell has been better than him so far this season with this new Mercedes car. Don't be shocked if Mercedes can take the fight to Ferrari as the season goes on.
Mercedes looking prime to do that. A couple comments in the chat room. This kind of sounds like when Vels was DQ'd at Hungary last year over the fuel issue. Gee, that's disappointing, referring to the news about Denny Hamlin being disqualified. And then also, if Mercedes finishes in second, I will be happy that they bounce back. Still, I want to see competition. A lot of competition left in Formula One. There's still a lot of time going on. And one series, The competition is really for second place because Jamie Chadwick, she is just dominating. She is now up to 6th place in the grid ranking from the W Series. She is 5 for 5, has won 7 in a row, while other drivers like Emma Kimalainen, Alice Powell, they are both not in the grid ranking. And last year, they were the top 2 rival contenders for Jamie Chadwick for that championship. Kobe, how shocking is it to see that Emma Kimalainen, Alice Powell, they're just struggling considering last year they were contending for a championship.
Yes, it's been very surprising to see that Jamie Chadwick's usual competitors, Emma Kimalainen and Alice Powell, just haven't had the same form. And I guess you can say, Jamie Chadwick has certainly improved a lot as a driver, and she's continuing to get better. And I've even said it might be unfair at this point for her to be in the W Series because she is so much better than the rest of the competition. Been super unfortunate for Emma and Alice, but it seems like Jamie Chadwick might end up wrapping up this championship before the end of the season, and then the best thing that Kimalainen and Powell's gonna have to do is just try to go out there and have a great second half of the 2022 W Series season.
They need a great second half. A couple comments in the chat room. It's amazing how Ferrari can create their best car in over a decade and find still creative new ways to self-destruct. A lot of people were comparing Vettel crashing the Hockenheim to Charles Leclerc. It's going to be really interesting to see how they bounce back. They got hungry, and then the big summer break. And, of course, we're going to be following a new update grid ranking later tonight, reflecting the disqualification of Kyle Busch, Denny Hamlin, your first and second place car, and Chase Elliott, now the new winner. Kobe, one series, essentially is now their off-season, SRX, but they have plenty of controversy to talk about as well.
Yeah, and before getting to SRX, have an update on the Denny Hamlin and Kyle Busch disqualification, and I found out the correct pronunciation for the word. It's actually pronounced fascia, and NASCAR said that there was material found on the front fascia of the next gen car. That type of material they found, it shouldn't have been there. And to repeat the definition of what the front fascia is, they're typically large panels that are designed to extend across the front of a vehicle cover to shock absorbing components, improve vehicle aerodynamics, and provide an attractive appearance. So the front fascia right there on the front of the car, that's the issue that NASCAR has, and NASCAR says that they're planning to confiscate the number 11 and 18 cars and take them back to the R&D center for further evaluation. And with Chase Elliott now being promoted to the race win, I guess you can say Chase Elliott swept the weekend, getting 2 race wins because he ended up winning the SRX race last night at Sharon Speedway. And the 2022 Camping World SRX Series season is finished now with the champion crown last night. After 6 weeks of racing on Saturday night, Marco Andretti was crowned the 2022 SRX champion by 2 points over Ryan Newman. During Andretti's championship run, he used consistency to reach this point. Good finishes in the heat races, had 3 straight second-place finishes entering last night's season finale at Sharon. Ironically, Andretti didn't win a single heat race or main event to take home the title. However, some people noticed a possible issue with the SRX scoring, leading to questions if Andretti actually won the title over a scored error. That possible error suggests that Newman might be the actual champion. This morning, SRX CEO Donald Hawk acknowledged the confusion, thanking well-respected member of the motorsports community, NASCAR man on Twitter, for taking the time to research this issue. And here's where the confusion comes into play. Back at the season opener at Five Flag Speedway, Andretti pitted prior to the second heat race. Since Marco finished 5th in the first heat, he should have restarted 9th in the second heat, but ended up restarting 12th instead. NASCAR man says the 3-point difference between where he deserved to start versus where he actually did was apparently credited to Marco after the conclusion of the race at Five Flag Speedway. But this move wasn't disclosed to the public at all and showed up in the standings without a proper explanation. In the end, the 3-point bonus was labeled as an attempt to fix poor officiating that night. At the time, it didn't seem like a big deal at all, but proved later to be significant when it came off as a scoring error. Could SRX have avoided this fallout altogether? They were transparent about the point situation right from the start. Also, what are your thoughts on Marco's SRX title?
Who cares? I mean, and listen, let me be clear. When I say who cares, I don't mean who cares when it comes to Marco Andretti. Congratulations on his championship. I think we got that clarified with the scoring error. When I say who cares, this is what I mean by that. It's not that if I didn't care at all about SRX, I wouldn't be talking about it right now. When I say who cares, I'm talking about that's what SRX's motto seems to be at this point, 2 seasons into the series. We saw it last week. Obviously, we had the whole debate over what happened with Hailie Deegan's race and should she have been allowed back on the lead lap? Do caution laps count? Do caution laps not count? There seems to be no consistency. And let me just say this, and this is a criticism that I've had of NASCAR as well when it comes to stage racing and everything. If your point system is complicated enough to the point where something like this happens, it's probably not a good point system. So maybe they should look into that and how they award points for the heat races going into Season 3, if there even is going to be a Season 3. I know we'll get into that on the next question, but it's been so difficult for me to get into SRX, and this is just the latest example of why. It seems like nobody really has a clear-cut understanding of what's going on. There's so many issues like this that come up that distract from the actual racing. The racing itself gets interrupted with green flag lap limits and all that. I don't know. There are so many issues with SRX right now from a pure racing perspective that I don't know that there's going to be much of an audience, at least not as much of an audience as they were expecting to have going into Season 3. And I don't want to get too ahead of myself here because I know that's the next question, but there are a lot of questions surrounding the entire series right now, and having an issue like this certainly does not help. They should have been more transparent whenever they fixed the issue. I've been trying to read up on it, trying to just see what the heck is going on. Is Marco Andretti even the real champion? I mean, it doesn't get much more disastrous than that. If you have fans on social media debating who the champion actually was, because was there a scoring error? That cannot happen in any professional series whatsoever, yet it happened here in SRX.
I completely agree with everything you just said, Ben. Overall, I'll also say congratulations to Marco Andretti for winning the SRX series championship this year. And like I said, I agree with you. I mean, it's crazy that if SRX does continue for next year, I think they need a different point scoring system. In my opinion, SRX kind of reminds me of the old IROC series because they had drivers from different motorsports backgrounds. So if SRX does come back for Season 3, they need a different point system. They need a different point system.
Well, Adam, I think SRX needs a lot more than just a different point system. I think they need to make a whole laundry list of changes, and I will have to say, about the points in general. I felt there was I'm glad you made this comment, Humperdinck, because that was exactly what I was going into next. You say SRX is mostly made for the spectacle. You don't think they were really taking the points seriously. I think that's perfectly clear, Humperdinck, that they weren't taking the points seriously at all. But I'm trying to wonder now, what's SRX's identity? Like are we going to have a real points championship, or if it doesn't matter, why don't we just not have points at all? And just race for fun and all of that, and so people can see some of their past heroes race and some all-stars all around the motorsports community. But I think the biggest disappointing thing, in terms of the point situation, a lot of people had no idea, like, where they wanted to see the championship clinch scenarios like we typically see in other series. Like, what did this driver need to do in order to win the championship and all of that entering the weekend? I feel like if someone did the math for that, it would have made it a lot easier to follow. And I think that the points need to come out, several hours, or at least the very next morning after the race. A lot of times we didn't even have the official points until when the work week began. So I think that was certainly a major issue, and it was really hard to follow along with the season-long driver championship, even if it was just for a total of 6 weeks this summer. And after 2 seasons of competition, should SRX return for a third year on CBS in primetime in 2023?
When I saw this question, like I said, it reminded me of the old IROC series, with SRX, but it was nice to see different drivers compete, like Michael Waltrip, Ryan Newman, Tony Stewart, Chase Elliott, and his father, and they're all different drivers from different disciplines. But I don't think SRX should come back. I don't think it. I don't think it will come back. I don't know if the ratings are good enough for the series to come back. And you mentioned Kobe. There's a lot of things that they need to fix. So to me, I don't think SRX should come back for 2023. It had a good run for 2 seasons.
I think SRX will be back. I think Tony Stewart's a little bit too stubborn to let one of his creations die after just 2 seasons. But I will say this. I think the question as to whether or not it will be on CBS in prime time on Saturday nights is certainly a massive question mark. I think, again, I don't know if this is on CBS or on SRX as well, but Kobe, you brought up a good point, as well. It didn't even occur to me that there really weren't like live points as they run or championship clinch scenarios. Obviously, a point system is so complicated that the series itself doesn't seem to have a 100% grasp on what's going on. So maybe we can't expect that of CBS if the series doesn't even know. But that would have been helpful to have for your championship race. I got to think so. I think that maybe I don't know. There's so much to talk about with SRX. I feel like I've talked in circles. I don't want to monopolize our time here towards the end of the show, but I think that's the biggest question mark. I think the series will return, but primetime CBS, like I mentioned last week, they can't be too happy with the ratings. Now, all credit to Marco Andretti coming into a car that's completely different than what he was used to for so many years in the IndyCar series and winning a championship. Again, we think with this scoring error and everything, but he still had a lot of great runs, and it's been great to see him have some success in his post-IndyCar career beyond just the Indy 500 that he's been doing every year since he stepped away full-time. But again, SRX has so many issues that they need to iron out. I don't know, but they can get that all done in just one off season. I think it's going to be a couple of years down the line. And again, like you mentioned, Adam, maybe we don't even get it all next year. We'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, and as we saw, since they've torn up so many cars in the last 6 weeks or so, they didn't even have any backup cars available. So Matt Kenseth and Ryan Blaney, when they had a little pile up in the first heat, they had to sit out the entire second heat so they could get the car repaired enough so they could compete in the main event. That's really unfortunate. That's costing thousands of dollars in Tony Stewart and Donald Hawk's pocket that they certainly don't want to have. And if they are going to come back, obviously they're going to have an entire year to fix all of these cars and get everything running well again. And like you were saying, Ben, about Marco Andretti's title, we certainly don't want what happened last night to try to take away from the great run that he's had this season. And Marco said that despite winning the title, his hand got caught in the wheel and ended up with a broken wrist. So certainly want to send our best wishes to Marco as he recovers from that. And like you were saying, Ben, SRX, I think it may be a 50% chance it comes back, but at CBS in prime time, that's probably up in the air at this point. I could see a more realistic option probably been Flow Racing next year. That might be something where they look into. But if CBS brings them back another year in prime time and they agree to that, I think they'll certainly have to clean up a few things. And we're not saying we have to hold them to the same standard, as Formula One, IndyCar, or NASCAR, but we certainly expect, at least basic competence.
And Kobe, if I could just add one more thing to that real quickly here. I think if CBS bring it back, it's going to be a Paramount Plus sort of deal. I don't think it's going to be primetime, big CBS Saturday night. I think they'll probably shove it on Paramount Plus or, CBS Sports Network is even lower tier than NBCSN was. I don't think that would be a very appetizing deal for SRX. But if CBS brings it back, I see it being very difficult for them to justify the primetime 2-hour slot that they've been taking up on Saturday nights on the big network.
And with that being said, it's now time for our Grid 1 shining moment from this motorsports weekend across the globe. So I'll start with you, Joe. What's your Grid 1 shining moment?
Before we get to the shining moment, we do want to update on the NASCAR Cup Series disqualification of Kyle Busch and Denny Hamlin. Right now, the results have been posted up where Denny Hamlin and Kyle Busch are listed as disqualified. So everybody does move up 2 positions since they were the top 2 When it comes to the playoff points, Denny Hamlin only has 12 playoff points right now. He is behind Chase Elliott, Ross Chastain, William Byron, tied with Joey Logano for 12 points in the playoffs. Kyle Busch only has 6 playoff points and 1 stage win and 1 win. And I have to ask this quick question to you, Ben, Kobe. Kyle Busch, after this race, he seemed calm, positive mood, despite finishing second place. The M&M's Fan Appreciation 400. Now, all those points are gone. How big of a blow is this for Kyle Busch, and especially with the rumors of where he may or may not be in 2023?
Well, obviously, there's still a lot to be determined when it comes to Kyle Busch's contract situation beyond just this year and his sponsorship and everything. I kind of got some mixed messages. There was a tweet that was sent out where Kyle, and Joe Gibbs was coming to congratulate him on his runner-up, and Kyle just seemed very uninterested. It looked like somebody that looks like he's moving on. But then the NBC team seemed to suggest that he was in a pretty positive, upbeat mood. Maybe they're closer than we realize to putting a deal together. I don't know that one disqualification is going to be the difference between whether or not Kyle Busch comes back to Joe Gibbs Racing or not. But, in terms of a morale boost for Kyle going forward over these next few weeks, the fact that he doesn't have plans set in stone for 2023 certainly can't be helping his mood. And obviously having a second place finish taken away won't help that either.
Yes, it's pretty demoralizing for Kyle Busch and Joe Gibbs Racing to have this happen to this number 18 team, especially during a time where they're trying to get a deal done between Busch, Gibbs, and TRD. And it's a little surprising they hadn't been able to get this done so far. But, Ben, as you said, we've seen some deals come together as late as October. So if they really want to make this work, they can go deep into the year if both sides are truly committed to each other. Apparently, they were close to a deal, but unfortunately, it fell apart, and they're like back at square one trying to find sponsorship to bring Kyle Busch back another year. If all else fails, I could see Kyle Busch, instead of sign a multi-year deal, maybe do what Brad Keselowski did, sign a 1-year deal with Team Penske and then move on the very next year, and so you have more time to plan around your future. I could see possibly a 1-year deal as an option for Kyle Busch, or maybe they get the multi-year deal done and get all that figured out on a more long-term basis. But sure, this certainly doesn't help Kyle Busch's morale at all. It will still be surprising to see Busch leave Joe Gibbs Racing. Apparently he's had some conversations with Stewart-Haas Racing, so that's like a plan B right now, as Eric Almirola has stated earlier this year that he's retiring, but it seems like he's having some second thoughts as well about retiring. So there's still a lot in play. And also wanted to point out, I know Ben will probably have more on this situation and encore shows in the future. If Kyle Busch leaves Toyota Gibbs, what's going to happen to Kyle Busch Motorsports? Because that's the perfect place for all of TRD's development drivers to go. And if KBM disappears or switches manufacturers to become a Ford factory team, if Busch leaves for Stewart-Haas Racing, then Toyota's gonna have to figure some things out where they're gonna put all their young drivers. I know that they'll have options at Tory Racing Enterprises, or maybe some of the Thorpe Sport drivers get pushed out in favor of those young prospects at TRD.
A lot of news are going to be following, and of course, Grid tonight, Wednesday, we'll have full update on all the news stories that broke out. With that said, we'll continue on with the Grid one shining moment. My one shining moment, I would have to say, got to go out over to the W Series. Belen Garcia getting her first podium, second place. Last year was a struggle. This year, she's been consistently in top 10. I would not be surprised if she has more podiums in the future.
Can't look past Jimmy Johnson when it comes to your one shining moment this weekend. A great run for that entire 48 Chip Ganassi Racing team over in the IndyCar series. And I got to say, I do wish we had more ovals on the schedule from a fan's perspective. I think Jimmy Johnson is certainly wishing that as well. And it's kind of ironic how it worked out. I remember after Dan Weldon's accident, when Jimmy was giving his condolences, he went so far as to say maybe IndyCar shouldn't race on ovals at all, maybe beyond just the Indianapolis 500. But now that they have the Aero screen, now that Jimmy's comfortable racing full time, it seems to be that that's where he's going to find his most success, or his greatest successes in the IndyCar series going forward. Michael Tiller as well, saying his one shining moment has to be Lewis Hamilton and George Russell in a Mercedes 2-3. Great to see them competitive again. I've got to say, I think Mercedes are getting very, very close to taking the fight to Red Bull and Ferrari And I think if they can close the gap just a little bit more, it's not going to take the misfortunes of Leclerc and Sainz falling victim to Ferrari's what can go wrong will go wrong to get on the podium once again. I think Russell and Hamilton are a very strong partnership. Mercedes just have to give them the car to be able to get it done.
Yeah, my grid one shining moment is the same as you, Ben. You have to give a have to tip your hat to Jimmy Johnson after the strong weekend he had in Iowa. And if they have more races on more oval races on the IndyCar schedule, I think we see a lot more strong runs from Jimmy Johnson. I'm sure he's very excited to go to Gateway in several weeks' time so he can try to emulate the same performance in the same type of weekend he had at Iowa. And he said that it was really nice, to be racing up front with the contenders because he's usually, towards the back of the pack, just trying to hold on to the tail end and try to do the best that he can. But I guess we can say we saw an old glimpse of vintage Jimmy Johnson this weekend. That's what I said on Twitter. Vintage JJ going out there looking competitive and having a really great time. And I was just really more surprised that Jimmy seems super comfortable in the car more than the drivers who have been, racing this type of machinery their entire lives compared to, Jimmy's is, just in his second season of racing in IndyCar, first full-time season, but that was quite a performance by him. I'm sure he's really thrilled with how he ran at Iowa this weekend.
And for me, I have two. First of all, give a call to Hy-Vee for promoting this IndyCar weekend at Iowa Speedway. They had, for the concerts, they had brought in musical talent that everybody knows. And for those of you who don't know, Hy-Vee is actually a Midwestern-based grocery store chain. So if you ever go to Iowa or Nebraska, you'll see a Hy-Vee there. So Hy-Vee promoting this IndyCar weekend at Iowa. And the second one has to go to the young gentleman that gave the starting command today at the Cup race at Pocono. For those of you who don't know, the person that gave the command is someone that everybody knows in NASCAR and on social media. His name is NASCAR Sammy, and he and I both share something together. We are both autistic. So to see someone like NASCAR Sammy give the command for the Cup race at Pocono was really special to see. So Hy-Vee promoting the IndyCar doubleheader at Iowa, plus NASCAR Sammy giving the command for the NASCAR Cup race at Pocono are my one shining moments from this motorsports weekend.
Definitely both bright moments, a lot of great moments throughout motorsports. Fortunately, Denny Hamlin, Kyle Busch, not exactly anything really to talk about for them. But of course, we'll be having news updates on our Twitter page at GRIDrankin. And we encourage everyone to subscribe, like the video, because Wednesday we'll be on the air with Grid tonight. Tomorrow, Grid Encore. Ben and Brandon will also have any developments too as they recap Xfinity, Trucks, ARCA, Indy Lights, and Formula 2 racing. So definitely you're a fan of the feeder system. We encourage everyone to watch Grid Encore tomorrow right here on YouTube. And of course, all this made possible by our Patreon subscribers. Calling the show Mark and Robin for keeping us on the air. You too can invest in the Grid Network. Have your name displayed here by joining our Patreons. Or you could do a one-time contribution through Buy Me a Coffee, like what Ed, Amber, and Zach have done. You could get your name up here at the end and the beginning of each show to show that you support the Grid Network. And be sure to follow us all over social media. We also live stream on Twitch, LinkedIn, Facebook, and of course Twitter as well. We got TikTok. Every Wednesday we do pick a winner, comment with who is going to win each of the races involved in the Grid ranking. And finally, this is our sponsor, Public.com. Use the referral code GRIDnet. You get free stock to invest in the stock market, and of course, tools and resources to learn about investing in the stock market and connect with new and current friends on Public.com. Referral code GRIDnet. We have a lot of news stories to cover. As I mentioned, Monday, Ben and Brandon will be on the air with Grid Encore. Then Adam and Kobe on Grid tonight on Wednesday. I will be on the air with Daniel for Women in Motorsports as we'll preview the W Series race weekend at France. Can Jamie Chadwick get another win, number 6? And then we do it all over again with Grid Life Saturday and Sunday. Be sure to subscribe, like, and comment, especially if you didn't get a chance to ask your question on the air with us. We'll definitely be happy to reply in the comment section. For Ben Schneider, Adam Lemeries, and Kobe Lambs from the Podium Finish, I'm Joe Samaniego. Thank you for watching today's program. We'll see you next time. Don't be an anonymous investor. Join the stock market social media platform, public.com. Invest any amount of money and share with friends and new friends. Discover new opportunities, such as new companies and potential business partners, and useful tools for beginners, and share your experience with friends on public.com. Link in the video description gets you $5 for being a Grid Network viewer. Use the referral code GRIDnet for your free $5 to invest. Start investing and networking on public.com.